So first of all, welcome to everybody, all 92 people so far, 93 and counting. We're living in truly, truly extraordinary times. We're all inundated with so much messaging in the last couple of weeks regarding whatever's going on around us. So I'll leave that to the professionals, and I'm going to focus on just how it's going to impact all of us who are involved in essentially reconstructing the way in which we manage ourselves and we manage the labor pool that sits in front of us, and how we better bring all of those things together in this essentially new sense of reality. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of context, first of all, regarding my journey to remote work. And there are probably three most important things that are signposts or events for me in the last 20 years regarding remote work. And they're a very strange collection of things. The first one was Osama bin Laden. The second one was Theresa Mannion. And the third one was the coronavirus. So that's a rather bizarre collection of three. So let me just weave my path through those three just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from and my experience in this wonderful world of remote work. And I'll try to keep today as upbeat as possible. There's a ton of crap going on in the media that's really hard to digest, so we'll just keep this as upbeat as possible. So 2001, 9/11 happened. At the time I was working for, see it there, an airplane right there, Virgin Atlantic Airways, running the customer service operation in North America for Virgin Atlantic in the New York area at the time of the 9/11. And with the challenge that we had with the airline was, how do we reinvent ourselves in a world when we thought it was astonishing that 25% of our business was going to disappear? Now, when you're looking at it right now and you see airlines saying that 75% of their business is going to disappear for the short term, it puts things in perspective. But at that time, that was the biggest dose of reality we ever had. So one of the issues that we had from a contact center and customer service perspective was we had to change the nature of what we were doing. And I came across a company in the US that was doing this bizarre thing called telework or telecommuting. And it was a really weird concept, and somebody pitched the idea to me, and like a lot of other people at the time, I kind of shrugged and thought, oh, that doesn't seem right. I mean, the only way you can ever communicate messages is in, person to person in a call center, and everybody gets the messaging out there. But really, I thought about it over the course of a day or two, and I ended up calling back the individual who shared the story with me. So in 2002, after much kind of thought process and much deliberation, I took the decision to move the Virgin Atlantic customer service operation, let's refer to it as the call center business, move it to a 100% remote model in the US. Now, this was 2002, and this was a pre-broadband era. This was dial-up modems. This was baud rates. This was an era of things like America Online and a variety of other I'm dating myself here tremendously, but you get the point. So, the 9/11 shifted the business that I was in so enormously. We moved it to a remote business at a time when very few other companies were doing it. And the reason I share that story with you is 18 years ago, it was possible to do remote if you had enough conviction and enough management support and leadership support to do it. Roll the clock forward. I ended up spending some time after Virgin Atlantic. I went to work at Apple and helped Apple build the first ever remote operability in Apple. And the very first remote agent phone call taken in Apple was in May 2006, which was precisely 13 months before the new business of the iPhone came about. So Apple was quite smart in getting the remote work in place beforehand. And just to give you a sense of scale, even though it's not publicly disclosed, and I'm making a guess of this, Apple probably now has about 20,000 people doing at-home work around the world. So really, the business has grown enormously. After that, after Apple, I joined Shopify, my current employer right here, and Shopify has a support team of a couple thousand people around the world, and we're 100% remote. And about 2 years ago in Ireland, we had two major events. We had two major storms. I think it was Emma was one and Ophelia was the other, and the whole country of Ireland shut down. Now, I do apologize for 1 second. We've got plenty of people from outside of Ireland, so I'll just get very local and parochial to Ireland for a short period of time. The whole country shut down, and the government said everybody needs to stay at home. And this was twice for 2 days each. Now, a couple of things, really interesting things happened. We had a news reporter in Ireland called Teresa Mannion, who became very popular and famous because of a couple of broadcasts that she gave regarding no unnecessary journeys. But the message landed with people that in a time of a significant natural event, it's better off staying inside. Now, we at Shopify experienced something quite incredible at that time. When all other industries in the country had shut down, all government departments had shut, we actually had about 105% capacity. And how could you possibly have 105% capacity? Well, very easily. Those folks who were supposed to go on vacation and supposed to take time off weren't able to, and they were stuck at home because the whole country was locked down. And so remote work for us at that time really, really worked. Now you roll on to this current situation, nobody really could have predicted. And even the greatest disaster recovery planners probably couldn't have predicted the severity of what we're seeing right now. So, remote work, I suppose the best way to bring all this together is that what's actually happened
Someone is at the front door.
Someone's at my front door. I'll talk to you in a few minutes about how I set up my remote office, but somebody just dialed the front door, and I've got the wonderful Nest product and Alexa product. So I'm actually able to work out that somebody's at the front door, which is 2 stories down. Anyway, I digress. So what's actually happened in the last couple of days is the whole landscape for all of those of us in the leadership world has foreshortened. We would have all predicted that probably by 2025 there would have been a very significant change in the way in which companies were moving towards remote work. What's actually happened now in the last 2 weeks is that gap has been foreshortened. So that 5 to 10 years that we would expect of the growth, that's happened in 1 week. Now, that is a massive, massive amount for anybody to actually digest. So it's a real challenge. And that's the very nature of why we're here today. So just that was a brief context for a couple of minutes to give you an opportunity to get an understanding of what, I suppose, my credentials when it comes to remote work. I've been involved in it for 18 years, and I've done a ton of work at the variety of companies that I've been at, and I'm now helping out with this wonderful organization called Grow Remote to really get remote work embedded in every community around the world, because the benefits of it are absolutely enormous. So if you wouldn't mind indulging me for a second, I'm going to go through a couple of questions that people popped to me beforehand. And I'll go through 1 or 2 of these. And in the meantime, could I ask that you use the Q&A function on the app? Right now, nobody's gone into the Q&A function. If you see it down at the bottom of your screen, questions and answers, please pop in any questions you have there, and I'll come back to it. But some of the questions that folks asked me to address today, and I'll go through those. First one was, is there a positive message that we can take away from what's happening, and what would it be? Yes, I actually do think there's a positive message. The message from it will pass and we will be stronger. Like this actually, folks, is a communication challenge, and it can really be managed. We're going to have to, as a leadership team, stay strong. We're going to have to make brave moves, but it can be done. I'll give you an example. I know of companies now who have a large outsourcing operation in places like India and the Philippines, and they have very quickly been put in a forced situation with hours notice to actually get folks to take their desktop computers under their arm and go to their residence and actually set up and work remote. That would never have been imagined 2 weeks ago, but companies are doing it, and they're doing it successfully. And the ones who are brave, and the ones who are bold, and the ones who are willing to bend the rules, they're the ones who are going to bend the curve, and they are going to create a business opportunity. Every time it's something desperate and challenging like this happens, it brings back that famous maxim of necessity is the mother of invention. I saw a great text on Twitter, or a great tweet on Twitter in the last week, listing the 8 or 10 companies that were born out of the 2008 global financial crisis. I think we need to take a moment and think about what companies are going to reinvent themselves, and what new companies are going to be spawned in this couple of weeks or couple of months when we're turned upside down. A few simple examples: a local restaurant here in my hometown in Cork in Ireland. Obviously, they have no business, zero business. Immediately, they pivoted, and they're now actually doing prepared foods, and they've created essentially almost a production line where you call ahead, you drive to the front door of the restaurant in advance, you've made your order, you've paid online, you pop the trunk or pop the boot of the car, and they would bring out the meal or the food and put it in the back of the car. Like 10 days ago, that you would have laughed, anybody would have laughed with that being a viable business. Now it's the only thing. And these are the things that are happening. And that's why I think this is a challenge, and it's a mindset and a communications challenge for all of us. Another question that came up was that, what's happening is an awful lot of change for every one of us to digest. Which of the changes will stick in your opinion? Well, that's a good, really, really interesting one, because I think that the most important thing for us all to think about is what percentage of people will never want to go back into an office environment. I've asked a few friends of mine in the remote business in the last couple of days what percentage will never want to go back into the office environment. Now, I'm sort of on the radical left wing on this one. So people would assume that I would be espousing that 50% of people will choose not to go back to the office. But no, I'm actually a realist. I think if 5 to 10% of folks in a couple of weeks' time go, you know what, I kind of want to do a lot more of this remote work, I think that will be quite a lot. But think of 5 to 10%. The number of people that will be throughout the world is gigantic. I'm just going to take Dublin as an example for the Irish guys in the group here today. There are I think it's at 91, according to the census, the 2016 census, there are 91,000 people commuting into Dublin City every single day from the counties of Kildare, Meath, and Wicklow. Just those three counties. If 10% of those go to their leader over the course of the next couple of weeks and say, I want more of this remote work, or I've proven that I can do my job so successfully from wherever, that's 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever the number is, 10,000 people who will be changing the nature of their business or of their work. That's a group of people who will not be commuting. That's a large group of people who are not putting the strain on the infrastructure. So it will enable the cities of Dublin and all of the cities around the world to actually attract more business and actually widen the talent pool on offer. So I think there's an enormous opportunity in terms of the changes. So another change would be the management mindset. There is going to be a significant need for that management mindset to change. And many of you today are wondering what are you going to do? And I'll be a little bit controversial for a second, but one of the challenges that we've all faced are people of my generation. Okay, I'm in my early 50s, and a lot of folks in my age group are in senior leadership roles in companies. And I would hold my generation significantly accountable for the level of intransigence and lack of thought process and lack of radical thinking in terms of remote work. That's changed, and I don't think that will ever get reversed, because the opportunities now for everybody to show that it can be done is enormous. The next thing that I don't think the next change that I think will stick, and we're seeing it in every country in the world, is what I call government acceptance. Every single leader in every country in the world is imploring people to work from home. That will stick. There is no possible way that they're going to go on air in every country in the world and implore everybody, please go back into an office now. It's not going to happen. We all know that. It leads into the next point, which is the long-term contingency planning. There's not a government agency in the world that will not have a contingency plan for a future pandemic, and it will be largely based on the portability of work, the ability to take the job that you're doing and essentially that thing that holds up the economy, and being able to bring it to a different location. Okay. What industries would be net beneficiaries, and what are net beneficiaries, and what industries will struggle? I think a very trite answer here, but every aspect of the information economy should actually benefit. If you have a laptop and if you have, a smartphone, you should be able to do your work from pretty much wherever you need to be. That's just a given. I don't think that's going to. I think we're all going to learn that very, very quickly. An industry that may well struggle is the real estate industry. So many of these cities are built on large buildings where we gather every single day. And I think the sociological change that this is going to bring is going to be absolutely and utterly massive. Okay, I am going to just jump into the Q&A. We've got about 15 questions in the Q&A. So let me go straight to the Q&A. So Jackie asked, do we need employees' home insurance to cover them while working from home? Just thinking of renters, etc. Jackie, I'll have somebody from my HR group who will be joining the call in a while. And if you just don't mind, I'll park that question for a few seconds. Somebody's asked, how do you keep on top of maintaining high performance output of agents who are work from home? Now, that's a really interesting question. Okay. I would reverse the question back to the asker and say, how do you actually judge the high performance or the output of the folks that you currently have in a call center? And I would be doing exactly the same. There is no difference. There is no difference. And if the way in which you maintain high performance is walking down the aisles of a call center to make sure somebody's at their desk, I would venture to say you really actually are not managing the output, you're managing their presence. So the output is the output. It's the listening to the calls, it's the managing the actual physical output, the number of tickets that people are producing, the quality of the work, and that shouldn't change. We've run at Shopify, our support organization is 100% remote, and we have never had an issue with performance. In fact, one of the challenges that we have in terms of performance and output is actually shutting people down at the end of the day, because people always want to do more. Okay. Alan Dooley. Hey, Alan, how are you? You and I talked before about hiring direct to remote. Can you briefly talk about that process? Useful for those who can only get their hands around hiring to the office first. Great question, Alan. I'm going to answer that in a slightly different way, if you don't mind. The challenge that a lot of companies have, Alan, is taking a fixed group of people and moving them to remote. And that's everything that everybody's experienced in the last couple of weeks. So there's going to come a time in a few months' time when companies will have ingested the fact that remote work works. And now they're going to have to go out and hire people who will want remote only. And I think that the talent pool of people who are self-selecting and saying remote only will change cataclysmically. It has changed, I mean, exponential growth in the number of people who will choose remote first. So actually, Alan, I don't think it's going to be a problem. There's 3 or 4 fabulous startups in Ireland in the last couple of years that are doing a ton of work in this arena. You've got a company called Boundless, who are creating the HR platform for companies around the world to really embrace multi-country teams of people from an HR perspective. There's a company called Abodu, who have a remote working platform, who are going to go on in leaps and bounds. There's a great company in Cork called EmployFlex, used to be called EmployMum, where they're taking the flexible work product and giving an opportunity for people who don't have the full 40 hours a week to give to an employer, but have some unit of that available. And that's another massive opportunity. And that's just 3 in Ireland, and they're all over the place. There's in the chat there, Tracy has put in information on Boundless and information on Abodu, and we will continue to keep that going as well. And there's some on EmployFlex. Thanks, Alan, for the question. Anything else you and I, Alan, can talk later? We've chatted before. Darren, can you give an idea on how you manage culture remotely and ensure people stay connected? Yeah, great question, Darren. Key thing that we do, and which we can't do right now, but it's a key element of what we do, is we have a once a month, maybe once every 2 months, depending, an in real life connection where we actually have we all gather in, not we all, we have the opportunity for people who so choose to gather together and have what we call a pop-up meeting. That helps those of us who are remote, who actually like and really like the social interaction. We call that a pop-up meeting. That's a really good thing to do. But it ignores the most essential thing, Darren, which is Zoom, Slack, Teams, all of the other apps that are out there. They can provide enough of a communication channel and a connection channel for absolutely any level of communication and any level of management. So number one, it's focus on the communication. So on a daily basis, I would encourage people, and you'll see this in all of the tips and tricks that are out there, and there's literally hundreds of them being posted every day, but regular connections, lots of quick 5-minute meetings. How you doing? How are you doing today? Anything I can help you with? That is the most important connection point, really small micro connections. And so everything from that micro connection to an in real life meetup on a discretionary basis every once in a while. Thanks, Darren. Renata, would you have 2 to 3 key messages to smaller businesses who quickly need to work remotely and may not have the same resources as larger corporations? Yeah, this is an interesting one, Renata. I've spent most of my career in the larger companies, and so that would always be my point of focus. But this is going to be individual to the industry and individual to the company. I think I'm going to go back to the point I made earlier on about necessity being the mother of invention. Every company out there that is going to have to reinvent themselves, and is going to have to find out what's right for themselves. And my advice on this is going to be really kind of silly, to be honest with you, Renata. It is, you got to try it, and you have to be comfortable making mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Your customers will allow you to make mistakes now. People are going to be quite forgiving because we're all in this together. We're all trying to do something differently. So I would say be not afraid of making mistakes. Robert asked, have you managed remote engagement? How have you managed remote engagement with teams in your experience? Good question, Robert. The interesting thing is the empirical evidence would show that fully remote teams are actually more engaged than, slightly more engaged than fully office teams. The ones that are a real challenge, Robert, are the ones in the middle, where you've got a team that's office-based and half of a team that's remote-based, and you're kind of stuck in the middle. Those are the folks and the groups that have a little bit of a challenge with engagement, because you kind of have like, which am I? What am I? Am I being excluded from this? How am I getting all the messaging, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So from a remote engagement perspective, it's everything I said earlier on. Those micro connections are super important. There's one other aspect to it, Robert, that I would really lean into, which is social connection. Not everything that you do in the 8 or 9 hours a day when you're leading online, not everything should be business related and work related. It's enormously important to have fun. It's enormously important to get to know the people that you work with. It's enormously important to remember that when you spoke to Mary last night, she made some comment about cooking something or going somewhere, and that you ask the question the following day. You keep that connection going. So the remote engagement happens piece by piece by piece. There's a ton of apps out there as well, Robert, that I would encourage people to use. For example, we use Slack, and in Slack there are apps that you can use to drive connections. There are great apps that drive, I think the app is called Donut, and there's another one called Sidekicks that enable you to set up your company to create random connections between various people, and essentially say, okay, Robert and Mary, here's a connection. You two, you got over the next 2 weeks, meet for a virtual cup of coffee and make that connection. That is essentially driving the drive-by, or curating the drive-by or water cooler type conversation that would happen in an ordinary organization. Okay, thanks, Robert. Mike San asked, what normally would be the challenges? What normally would the challenges be that we can see coming up along the timeline of remote work? First week down, novelty's over, people settling down, but morale drops a bit looking out to the future. What behaviors could we expect after 2 weeks, 1 month, and 2 months? Great stuff. I've been joined by Adrian Mongi, who is the talent business partner for Shopify here. So we'll come back in a few minutes and address one or two of the more HR related questions to Adrian. So thank you for joining, Adrian. So Mike has asked in the Q&A, what should we expect after 2 weeks, a month, 2 months? One of the key aspects, Mike, is the novelty is now wearing off. Okay, the first week. And yeah, it's been great fun. I'll tell you a funny one from those of us who work remotely all the time, and Adrian would be a good example of that, Adrian and myself. We live and work remotely. Adrian's in Westport, I'm in Cork, but we're constantly chatting with each other, and our life is actually very quiet and serene, and it's wonderful. The problem now is everybody's invading my life. My children are at home, sitting over there, finding. My children are at home. My wife is here. The dog is around. Like everybody's, so one of the challenges I have as a remote worker is it's actually got very busy. But what's going to happen in week 2 for those newbies who are in this space? Week 2 is going to be, one of the thoughts will be, how am I showing up for my team? And how am I showing up for my lead? And you'll kind of have that sort of imposter syndrome because the novelty's wearing off. You probably have your setup, your routines are becoming a little bit more ingrained. So you'll have that, I suppose, week 2, I would classify as kind of the imposter syndrome takes over. And you're going to have to work out your own demons on that and have a level of trust. You have to generate that level of trust with your team and with your lead to make sure that you are presenting yourself well. The best way to get over that is constant talking, constant reaffirmation. You have a meeting And at the end, you summarize what you've talked about and what you've agreed, and then you come back and you deliver that. That's kind of week 2, week 3. I would guess that kind of week 3, week 4, week 5, that time frame, there's an aspect that everybody in the remote world has felt. And anybody who hasn't felt it, I think, is probably cheating a little bit. You will have moments of abject loneliness where you think, I'm the only person in the world who's feeling this aspect of loneliness. Let me tell you, you are not. Absolutely not the only person feeling that. Everybody gets it. I've been doing this for an awful long time. There's not a month goes by when I won't have an hour or two, and it's getting shorter and shorter, where I won't have an hour or two where I am literally banging my head off the desk with frustration. And you surround yourself with great people. Adrienne and I have a good laugh every now and then because we would be each other's emotional crutches from time to time. And you have to, and one of the things I ask all of the people that I work with, do you have somebody at home that you can have a meltdown with? That's an important aspect, an important thing. Do you have a peer at work that you can have a really vulnerable meltdown with? So somebody at home and somebody at work. There's also another third element that's crucial. Can you have that vulnerable moment with your lead? So if there's one thing to remember, is keep that triangle in mind. Your lead, somebody from a social or home perspective, and somebody from a work perspective. If you have to build an element of total honesty, total trust, and total vulnerability with those 3 people. If you do that, you are putting on your Superman cape or your Wonder Woman costume. It'll make a huge, huge difference. Thanks for that question, Mike. Adrian, I'm just going to scroll up for a quick second to a question that came up earlier, and if you wouldn't mind answering it. It's from Jackie Keneally. It was, do we need employees' home insurance to cover them whilst working from home, just thinking of renters, etc.?
Yeah, so I can answer to that. So the answer that I'll give is on behalf of Shopify. So what we do here is no, like we don't ask. To that point, renters won't have home insurance. What we do have built in to our contracts is just liability around our equipment. We offer health insurance to our employees, so that would cover some of that liability. But no, the direct answer to that, Jackie, is we don't ask them to have a house insurance. We have elements of our contract that cover the protection of our equipment, IP security, and we cover that in our onboarding as well. So we'll cover the security elements of what we expect. They would sign an IP agreement, they would sign an employment contract, and then we offer, it's not obligatory to sign up, but we offer health insurance for our employees. So that's what we would do here.
Thanks, Adrian. Next question up is from my old friend, Mr. John Piavoy. John is asking, with the huge increase in online meetings, how do we better manage our meeting time versus doing time in this new world? Oh my God, that is the ultimate question that we all face. And it really is just a classic time management question, John. We have, in our company, and I would encourage people to do this, we have a fully open calendar function. We use Google Calendars. Everybody can see the calendar. You can, of course, designate it as private if you so wish, but we adopted fully transparent view, so anybody can see your calendar. I have no problem whatsoever putting in busy time, putting in things like head down, doing email, and I have blocks of time in my calendar. Adrian is probably now sifting through my calendar and going, you don't do enough of it. But it's very important that you actually have that doing time and that you balance the meeting time. If you're in meetings all day long, John, you're killing yourself because you're going to be doing it late at night. Don't do that. It'll make it awful. Okay, thanks, John. Colin Phelan asked, for the folks who are new to managing remote teams that were previously office-based, what's the best thing that leaders can do to manage the mental and emotional challenge for employees that have never worked remotely before? Connection, 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 and then when you're finished that, do a few more connections. You have to continue to talk to people. There's tons of tips and tricks, but one of them that Adrian, I know you've been really good at pushing with me and with other people is camera on all the time. Camera on all the time. If there's no such thing as a bad hair day. Well, there is no such thing for me as a bad hair day, but we have to focus on being present and being real. And, you know, most people have a challenge with this whole camera on thing for about 24 hours. But when you're 2 or 3 years into it, it makes absolutely no difference. It's just part of what we do. And if one of the funnier things about camera on is we all curate the space. So everybody sees, this is all that people see of my world right here, okay? And I'm very conscious about the space, and I've got my various things there. And I, you know, because that's the window into my world. And I think you should actually encourage people to curate their space as best as possible and actually talk about it. That might sound like the most banal, stupid point, but it actually helps with the mental and emotional challenges that people have. So Colin, if you have any further follow-up on that, please feel free to connect later. And that's the same with any of the other questions.
John, I might jump in if you don't mind on that one a little bit. So absolutely want to plus one to what John said around connection. And connection can be communication via verbal or like what we're doing right now over camera. What I would also add to that is build a culture of trust, which is much easier said than done. But Shopify's foundation is built on trust. So I would have never embarked on a remote journey with Shopify, only for I felt so trusted. They never question or ask what I'm doing. And I've heard a lot of people over the last couple of weeks ask me as leaders in businesses, you know, how will I check in on people? How will I know what they're doing? You're going to know by their output and their productivity. And that's going to take patience, and it's going to require you to sit on your hands a little bit and not ring them and ask them what they've done for the day. So I heard yesterday about someone I know whose manager said to them, so I'm going to be ringing you every evening, and I want you to tell me what you've done for the day. That is the most demotivating thing you can do for someone remote, because you will guarantee to put that person off. It'll be on the back of their heads. They'll be scared about that phone call. It's not a productive way to treat employees in a remote scenario. And I know that's easier said than done, but really try and harbor a culture of trust, because once you go back to the office, or some of you may stay remote, that trust will go, you know, whether you have bricks and mortar offices or not, your culture is going to absolutely do a 360 for the good. So really, really try and build that culture of trust. And that's a massive topic that we probably can't touch on today, but if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn or separate to this meeting, I'm more than happy to talk to you about some of the stuff that we've done. Trust,
and communicate and connect. Huge ones. Thanks, Adrian. Maria, what about manufacturing or pharmas? You know, I can't speak to the industries I haven't worked in, but there are functions within pretty much every industry where quite a lot of the work can be done remotely. And I would flip the question around to anybody and say, if you have a smartphone, if the company has issued you with a laptop and you do any kind of work stuff on your smartphone, then there's an element of your job where you can be hugely constructive from a remote perspective. Like you know, it's just the nature of it. Watch the way companies, schools, governments are reinventing themselves right now. Watch what the education industry is doing. They are having to pivot incredibly. So there are aspects of the physical manufacturing and pharma world that has to be in person, but think of every other aspect. There are elements of that can be done remote, and it'll take a push. It'll take some innovation. It's going to take a mindset shift. So I think that's going to have to come internally, Maria, but you got to push really hard.
I can jump in briefly, John, because I came from manufacturing, so I might have a good lens. So I came from an in-house, every day in an office, and I worked in a manufacturing company, into this world of remote with Shopify. So I have both lenses. I would say that there's a massive leverage that manufacturing companies have, because the technology and the machinery they already use every day is unbelievable in companies across Ireland. So their ability to do a lot of this and automate some of their work it will require operators and people to go on to the floor, but their quality measures that they already do without such things as COVID hanging over us are unbelievable. So I'm sure they're going to be protecting all their staff that have to go in. But there's a lot of people in offices throughout manufacturing companies that are, can go remote next week, no problem. HR, finance, all of those support where I was can go remote, just as we all are here. There should be no issue there.
Thanks, Adrian. Lisa has a question. Could you advise how to keep morale and engagement high across teams while working remotely? I think we've touched on all of those. It's trust and communicate, and then you communicate and trust, and then you trust and communicate. It really is down to that. If you actually mistrust somebody in the real world, then you're going to mistrust them in the virtual world. So I would say it's actually a leadership thing, which is you're going to have to develop that muscle memory to start from a point of trust. You have to do it. Ruth has asked a question. When introducing remote work to a company, how do you manage equality issues between roles which are suitable for remote working and those that are not? That's a very that can be a very industry specific one. I think Adrian addressed some of those points. I think, I'm going to go back to the comment I made earlier on about necessity being the mother of invention. Companies and industries right now are actually truly addressing the hard question, looking in the mirror and going, what work, not what people, but what packages of work can actually be done outside of this physical building. And I think that's the mindset that we need to take. Forget about the individuals for a second. We'll put them back into the equation. Think of the packages of work that companies need to do. And then it's a case of reparceling those packages in a way that people can actually have a full remote job doing parcels and packages of work that need to be done remotely. If we do it the other way around, it's going to be a little bit of a dog's dinner. Keith has asked the question, how do you onboard new starters remotely? Well, Keith, just speaking from the company I currently work for, we source people remotely, we interview people remotely, we offer people jobs remotely, we onboard people remotely, we train them remotely, we lead them remotely, we performance manage them remotely, and in some small cases of instances, we let people go remotely. Every aspect of that can be done without ever actually physically meeting the person in the world, in the industry that I operate in, okay, which is in the customer service world, so kind of lucky there. But your specific question was, how do you onboard new starters remotely? It actually can be done, and I'm just going to twist it around a little bit, Keith, for a second, but as a company, we have a large number of people who are office-based, and historically those people have gone to one of our offices and have gone and done onboarding. Of course, in the last week that's changed. So what has historically been our office-based onboarding is now being done remotely. So they're leaning into those folks who do the remote onboarding to bring people on board. It's a case of getting your training team, who is probably have a function that is very much focused on the in real life experience. And you have got to move that training function into a virtual world where they're producing the content in a manner in which it's digestible for anybody from Guidor to Gorey to Goleen to somewhere, I can't even think of somewhere in Ulster that begins with G, but you get my point. Can be done.
Can I
Tomas,
touch on a little bit there?
go for it, please. Yeah.
John, before you go on, just two things. So before I go into the onboarding and some of the practical tips, I'll just touch on the engagement question. So there would be a couple of things. We have a stay connected 15 minutes at the end of our day as a team. So it pops up at different times depending where you are globally based, but it means that you just touch base with your team and you have a chat about random. It doesn't even have to be about work, but it's literally called a stay connected meeting, and it's a really engaging, really good tool. The other thing is that we do team times here. So we do a stand up with our team members and just chat through what we've planned for the day. We generally do our team times in the morning and our stay connected in the evening. So it's just bookending people to have a physical meeting. So it's camera on into a Zoom room, Sometimes we stand, sometimes people are walking around and answering the doors to postmen and stuff, but it's all a bit of fun. And it's just to chat with your team. So that's a really good engagement thing. To touch on the onboarding, from a practical point of view, there's 2 really good tips. You need to get your facilitators trained to train over camera, because I was a facilitator for years in a previous job and it was all in real life. So you need to get people honed in on skills over camera. You need to be very conscious of Zoom etiquette. So muting when you're not speaking, unmuting when you want to say something, offering people the chance to chat in written word as opposed to verbalizing it, because they could be shy over camera, asking everyone to have camera on. So there's loads of tips and tricks, and making sure there's loads of breaks. When you're remote, you need loads and loads of breaks if you're doing a day session, but you can build out a week's onboarding plan. We do it at the moment. They dial into one of these every morning, dial out for their lunch, dial back in for the afternoon. So it's exactly like you do in real life, but it's over camera. So it's very, very doable. And again, reach out on LinkedIn if you want to chat more.
And I think Niamh from Morgan McKinley, Niamh, will answer your question as well. And myself and Adrienne will be quite happy to detail a little bit more. Niamh asked from a Morgan McKinley recruitment side, like a lot of the clients are asking, how do you onboard remotely? So again, like I said, just reach out. Suzanne has asked, would it be a good idea, or do we ever use gifts, merchandise, or send items to remote teams, something tangible? Absolutely. Hey, listen, mugs, stickers, all the kind of simple stuff. There should be no change in the way in which you'd behave internally. Absolutely. And everybody likes to kind of curate their space. Like, for example, that little wallpaper decal cost me €35 from a company called wallpaperdecals.ie, I think. And it just gives me a sense of presence, makes me feel a little bit more connected to the company. So the simple things make a big difference. Thanks, Suzanne. Finn.
Just to give a quick shout out, John, there's some great Shopify merchants that do loads of these kind of products. So maybe hit up Shopify and see if they can help you out.
Good point. Finn asked a question. Any suggestions for managing comms to staff? Lots of tools like WhatsApp, Slack, etc. tend to result in chat. Can be hard to filter out key comms. Finn, great point. These apps are really good to keep the chat going. So for that kind of circuitous, constant conversation, I still find that email is a very good function to broadcast a message where you don't really want to engage in an over and back. So I think like what I've found in the last 2.5, 3 years at my current place is that email is a far better communication, a one-way communication channel. And then all of the other ones that you mentioned, like Teams and Slack and WhatsApp, are actually better for essentially constant communication. They replace the in real life chat. Okay. Thanks, Finn. Erica, when managing a team remotely, do you recommend all team catch-ups? Do we recommend catch-ups including all teams? Or do you find it better to tune into what the individuals need from you and plan around that instead? Okay, I'm going to rephrase that slightly. Just so should you have team meetings or should you have lots of one-to-ones? I think the magic answer really, Erica, is you got to do both. By doing the one-to-ones, it makes you're building that connection with each of your staff members, but then bringing it all together and making sure they're aware of an overall common purpose is massively important. So the answer is you got to do both. Tomas, how do you cope with a team member while working remotely who has mental health issues? Is there anything we can do as leaders to help them? Absolutely. It's a case of listening. It's watching the signals. It's recognizing that every one of us has lonely moments. Like Adrienne and I would both be strong individuals. We both have had moments where we've both wobbled and we've lent on each other. And that's crucially important. You as a leader have got to show that level of vulnerability. And you've got to be able to say, at some stage, look, I'm taking the next 2 or 3 hours off because I'm having a shitty day. You got to do it, because that is actually the most important aspect of leadership here. If you can do that, you're empowering the other people to be totally and utterly honest. And if people are honest and open and vulnerable, you're going to get their best work product. I would also encourage all companies who've got an employee assistance program, encourage people to reach out and use it. It's not for when you're in trouble. It's for when you are you're kind of at a crossroads and you've got thoughts in your head. That's when you should be using these programs. But from a leadership perspective, you need ears up and you need to be watching and listening. And as a leader, when you're in a Zoom room like this and you're watching 10 faces, trust me, within a very short period of time, you'll see the people who are showing things that would cause you a level of concern. You'll see it from the level of interaction. You'll see people going very quiet. You'll see people who are leaning towards cameras off. All of those are signs that you need to kind of lean in and actually talk to people one-to-one. So that's my uneducated view on it, but it really does work.
John, I might just jump in on that one. So I would also advise, you touched on it, but just to be very clear, if there's any companies here that are, paying into a big premium with Irish Life or VHI or whoever your provider is, reach out to them next week and ask them to do a 1 hour with your leadership team in a Zoom like this, and get some tips and tricks to manage wellness remotely. They're all in that space because we've been reaching out to them all over the last couple of years. They're definitely all in that space. They're used to doing these kind of meetings, and get an hour or two training from them, and ask them to give you some resources. Make that very, very available for your leadership teams so that they can then pass that down to their employees. And keep sharing. I cannot stress enough, EAP details, Modern Health, whatever it is that you use, and then defer to medical assistance, because you can do so much in support, but then we need to use medical professionals as well.
Thanks, Adrian. Ray O'Connor asked, there may be concerns among employers about potential liability with the extension of the workplace, particularly in the current environment. Can you touch on what obligations employers must provide to their remote employees? Are there issues employers should be aware of, and what potential issues can occur? Right now, in the current environment that we're in, we have no choice but to work remote. I think it's going to change the nature of obligations, Ray, very, very significantly and severely. I'll just give you an example, and I'm going to do it from a health and safety perspective. So I'm not going to answer your question directly, but I'll give you a story. I've been asked by quite a number of health and safety experts, even up to quite recently, like, how do you manage somebody who's got a neck issue, back issue, whatever? As you probably see, I have a standing desk. I'm standing up all the time. It's what I need to do. If I presented myself to my doctor and said, I've got a problem with my neck or my back, this is how we at Shopify do it. I would then contact my lead and say, look, I'm having this issue with the neck and back. It's kind of a bit sore. And we would then engage, which we do. We have a third-party health and safety company who would come to the home, assess my workspace, and make a recommendation. And we then would get that from this company, and they would detail what accommodation needs to be made, and we take care of that. Now, you'd expect, and this is the classic mindset for a second, and this is where, Ray, people of your age and my age, because I know Ray, we went to school together, we need to get over this. The thought that, everybody's going to want it. No, that's not the case. You'll find a very small number of people will look for the accommodation, because we're saying we trust you completely. And when we're dishing out trust all day long, what you're going to get back is trust in return. We've had a tiny number of people looking for accommodations. They're all fully bona fide accommodations. And that is the mindset shift that we all have to think about. It's enormously important that you do that. If you lead with trust, you will get it back. If you lead with mistrust, God bless you. You'll get it back in spades. Okay, we are at 12:58. So is there any other question coming up here? If there's anything else that comes up, please pop an email to hello@growremote.ie. Thank you very much for your time and engagement. I have not read the questions in the chat, but I'm sure Tracy will detail them to me later on. And there's a great thread in the chat, I believe, with a ton of links for everybody. I'd be interested to find out, and please just pop Tracy an email at hello@growremote.ie on things that you would have preferred to have seen us cover, or avenues that you'd want us to go down if we were to do this again. Huge thanks to Adrienne for jumping in for the second half of the call. Thank you very much. And also publicly thank Adrienne for all the help that she's given me over the course of the last couple of years, keeping me sane and also keeping me out of court. And great thanks to Tracy for inviting us. We will participate at a later stage if there is a need. Most of you will find me on LinkedIn as well, and if there's a question that you have to ask directly, please feel free to do that.